Hello, everyone. Our group today is delighted to welcome you to our joint symposium with the London Design Museum. We're a group of 8 artists at the Royal College of Art, and we have the great honor today to be welcoming Eleanor Anand, who's an international artist. And the current topic of our research is the material of paper. We wanted to celebrate its tactility as well as its diversity and its unifying power in such extraordinary times. And we felt that Eleanor would be a wonderful voice to bring to the conversations. So what she will do is she will come and introduce herself, and then she will show you something she's currently working on to give you an idea of one of her processes. And then we will all be asking her questions. So we hope you'll enjoy this.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here with you all. Thank you so much for including me in this. My name is Eleanor Anand. I live here in the mountains of North Carolina at Penland School of Craft, which is in the United States one of the kind of premier time and space to explore whatever it is that drives you forward. And so what I've been doing for the last 3 years is really focusing on what I call the sculptural potential of paper. My background is in printmaking, so I've always used paper, and I know how familiar it is to, most people are familiar with paper in one way or the other. And for me, that background is in drawing and in printing. But in recent years, I've wanted how paper can work in different ways, and so hence the focus on sculpture. Within that, I've been exploring cardboard forms, which obviously have a lot of strength in their structure and can be used to build larger forms that are actually weight-bearing. I've also been making modular forms that are printed on one of my letterpresses, and then I die cut those forms and fold them into modular units like this, that then get pieced together. The newest body of work that I've been working on is cast paper. And so the casting paper allows forms that are less rigid in the way that the cardboard or the modular folded pieces are, because I'm working more in those with folding techniques. With the cast paper, I can create more organic forms to work with. So I thought today I would just show you generally that process and try to answer some of the questions along the way. So to give you an idea of how I got to this point, I was making the modular folded forms and very excited about working modularly. It relates back a lot to letterpress printing and setting type, where you're using one letter after the other to print it, and then they get run through a press and die cut. So this is a die where there's a sharp edge, and then there's also creasing roll here. So when I run, after I've printed and I run that through the press to cut it down, I get a form like this that then has, you can see it has the crease lines, so it's ready to be folded, and then it also has tabs. So those get folded up, and what happens is when they get cut out, you can imagine there's all the negative space on paper. So that looks like this in this form. And I've always had the intention of then using this paper for another print or something like that. But because this is a nicer cotton paper, I realized that I could then take this sort of waste material from the die cutting process and turn it back into pulp and then cast it into new forms. So there is a connection for me in really, the way I think of it is honoring the material and using it to its full capacity. So instead of just sending this off and having never used this, just tear that down into small pieces. And I know that Elizabeth is doing a paper mache demo, and I watched a little bit of that preview, and you know, it's not that much different as far as prepping of the material. In traditional hand paper making and in larger industrial paper making, often you're using a machine that then breaks down the fiber so that it's ready to be turned into sheets, formed into sheets. What I do, because this is already very processed paper, is I don't really need to use the paper beater, because it's already been broken down into that form. So I tear it down and I soak it overnight so that the fibers are all opened up. And so just to kind of give you an idea, you know, I'm tearing the pieces down into something like this size. So, you know, I'm gonna do inches, which I know is totally backwards for you guys, but let's say like about 1 inch by 1 inch. Those pieces get soaked, and then I use a stand mixer to break that down back into pulp. And so I'm gonna try to show you guys what this looks like. I've got a bucket here with a bunch of pulp in it, and I strain a bunch of the liquid off, and I'll try to see if I can show the camera what this looks like. You know, it's broken back down into pulp, and then I can cast with it. Of course, there's the whole process of making. This is a plaster mold that I made. I created a positive using clay, and then cast this plaster mold. And this can be used for slip casting and for paper casting. Plaster is great because it's porous, and over time it'll suck all the rest of that moisture out of the paper pulp. It is different from slip casting in that it takes a lot longer for it to dry in this mold. I usually let it sit for about 8 hours with a fan on it, and then I'm able to pop it out. But so what I'm gonna do is slowly work the pulp into the mold. I would be doing this flat normally, but the pulp gets put into the mold. I work in small sections and have a lot of the liquid drained out. And then I go back with a sponge, just a regular sponge, and press into that form so that it's conforming. And then of course, get rid of the water as I go. And I will work pretty, push pretty hard to remove a lot of that water, because the more water we get out, the faster that dry time will take. And the pressure, of course, gives you a better impression in the mold. So I just continue to do that, working all the way around the mold until build layers on top of each other. And as long as I'm doing that quickly and applying a fair amount of pressure, it all forms together really well. And I've never had a problem with it separating. You know, if you were starting from cotton rag, you might need longer times you would need to beat it in a different way on the paper beater, and you would need longer times for that. And of course the pulp would behave a little bit differently. But I am always using this recycled paper to cast. So this is just sort of what it looks like with one kind of pass of the pulp. And then I keep on building that up. And then when it's done, these are pretty chunky, this is a pretty chunky plaster mold, so I can actually sit it on its edge in front of a fan so that it's getting circulation on both sides. Like I said, that plaster will pull out a bunch of the moisture. So that's sort of the general casting technique. And then from those, once that dries, what I'll get is something like this, which is hardened, and you can maybe see there's a bunch of flecks in it because, like I said, it's all recycled, and sometimes the pieces have a little bit of ink on them. You know, I'm not trying to get a pure, clean form. I'm trying to use what I have. And so once I have that form, I'll use it as kind of the building blocks to create a sculpture. And I'll paint it with milk paint and break them down into smaller pieces and piece them together. I have some small examples of what that might look like. So this is a form that is what this kind of shows. I'll try to get closer just to show like what happens when I paint it. The lighting's not perfect, but you can see that it sort of changes. It leaves the surface or the structure, so the casting, and I leave this kind of what I call the decal edge on the casting, and then you can still see the form really well, but I've created a new surface with that milk paint. So that's sort of like a building block for one of my larger sculptures. There's another, small example of what happens when I start kind of piecing the pieces together. So this is actually 5 pieces laminated together to form this larger. You can kind of see there the cross section where they're stacked up on top of each other. So that's just sort of a building block. I think the things that appeal to me, and I know there was a question about how important drawing was to me in my practice, and I think that I view this work as drawing in 3 dimensions, and drawing has always been a really important part of my practice and I guess a foundation block in everything that I do. In the drawing, I like to work really organically, and so this work with paper has been exciting because I think we often think about paper as sheets of paper or cardboard material, things that can be folded and have a very 2D form. But as with paper mache, in the casting, you can really have the pulp or the strips of paper or however you're building, you can have that become any form you want. And so a lot of the pieces, the newer work that I'm making, become kind of 3-dimensional drawings in my mind. So I'm always thinking about line work. And I know there was also a question about in working, like working hands-on with material, like how do you, I think the question was sort of how do you stay in touch with that in such a digitally driven world? And I definitely find for myself that to understand materials, I need to actually touch them. I need to work with my hands, and that I start to understand the world more, and by understanding materials more. And so that is key to my work, and I think it's pretty key in a lot of sort of contemporary craft work. But that's not to say that I'm against digital, because I'm not a curmudgeon, and I'm not a traditionalist, and I do find that there are obviously a lot of very useful ways to use digital technologies. In my own practice, while I do still draw by hand with pencil and paper, I also have a tablet that I draw with. In the larger cardboard forms that I do, which are basically just larger versions of these small die cut pieces. I do laser cutting for that, and so I didn't mention this before, but my education is in graphic design, and so I've always had to bridge that world between digital and tactile, because I was drawn into letterpress printing, screen printing, and things where I could actually feel the material and have a product, but I was always navigating the other digital side of that. So I have some of the know-how to then translate my ideas from digital into these more material-based pieces. And so, yeah, the cardboard pieces get laser cut instead of die cut so that I can prototype things a lot faster. And I think that those kind of technologies are amazing for speeding up idea generation. But I think that ultimately the goal for me is always to be working with my hands and connecting in that way. So I know that those were a couple of questions that I thought connected directly to this, but if you all have other questions that you'd like me to go over, or you want me to show you anything else with this casting, just let me know.
If you wanted to show us just one last thing with your casting, and then we'd love to start asking you questions.
Do you want to see the demo again, or
if there's anything else you wanted to show? I don't know.
You know, I could show you, if you're interested in seeing the cardboard forms, I could grab one of those just to show you kind of how they relate. I don't have any. All of my cast paper pieces, besides these samples, are out at exhibits, which is good. I am working on a new one, and I have some parts. Let me grab them real quick. So just to show you some other forms and that sort of the organicness of it, this is actually the first form that I cast. This is a larger plaster mold. And then these I often will break down so that I can form these larger looping pieces that then get stitched together. And I think that I can send some images of those to give you a sense of what that becomes. And then there's also, you know, this is very much to me just a line segment. You know, it's when I draw in pretty like small and quick, tiny marks. And so what I was talking about in relating it back to drawing is that when I'm making these three-dimensional drawings, I'm building in that way where I'll connect two pieces and I can think about how that becomes a drawing to be mounted on the wall, or often I'll have armatures made for them. So they're sort of, I call them like draping lines where they conform to the armature that they're built with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question, Eleanor? A couple of times you said milk paint. What exactly is that?
Milk paint is an old-fashioned kind of paint that puts pigments and milk proteins, I believe, together. And a lot of people use it kind of in antique painting. A lot of woodworkers use it, and it works really well on these cast paper forms. And one of the sort of defining aesthetics of it is that it has a very matte finish, a very dull matte finish. So I don't think that that's something I can show on the internet. I wish that, you know, hopefully one day you all can come and actually see them in person and touch them, but it's a very flat finish. And so there's not any kind of gloss to it. And the way that the layers build up is really appealing. So I get it in powdered form and then mix it myself with water. And then I can brush it on, and I'll do washes of it to get sort of thinner layers. Does that help?
Okay, yes. Actually, I have a question which related to the microcosmic structure of the material. And I try to find out the relationship between paper and the microcosmic structure. So my question is, can paper simulate the microcosmic structure of other materials to make empathy of various feeling? I mean, different feelings. Yes.
Yeah, that's a huge. That feels like a huge question, and I'm not sure. You know, I think that that would be an interesting thing to do a study on. I can't say that I have expertise in that and know what the answer to that is, but I would love to see the research on it. I am very interested in how this material can be used outside of the art, craft, design world in ways that it connects to other disciplines, but I can't really say that I have much experience on that level with the paper and the structure.
Yes, thank you.
So you show your different type of paper works, and we already noticed that you use paper a lot and as different kind and as different approaching to different forms of art. And my question is, does paper for you as a material connect to kind of certain identity for you?
Yeah, I feel like it has to. It has to connect to identity, and I say that because it's a hard thing to separate from, because for me, paper has always been an important part of my life in one way or the other. And as I've gone further into my artistic practice, I'm able to see why it always comes back to that material. And in these 3 years of this residency, I've really been able to look at that closely and why I connect with it. I think now, having explored these more sculptural ways of using the material, I see that the versatility in it is something that I connect with. I think that you know, there is a level of approachability in the material because people are familiar with it, even if they're not familiar with working with it with their hands or printmaking or anything like that. You know, they've seen a book or written on a sheet of paper or something like that. So there is that approachability that I find appealing in it. And then I also think that versatility is what I'm seeing now to be part of what I'm connecting to, because for me and my identity as an artist, I never want to stay what I would consider stagnant. Like, I'm always interested in using different techniques and leaving space for growth in what I'm exploring. But it does always come back to paper in one way or the other. I mean, sometimes I'll you know, play with other materials, but I think that there is something about paper and the way that it allows me to work in so many different forms and different processes that kind of connects to my identity as an artist. And I often find that, you know, in maybe my younger days, when I would look at someone who was completely driven with on one path and they were like, I'm a ceramicist, this is what I do. I thought, you know, being a letterpress printer and being a sculptor and being a painter and being a graphic designer was a bad thing, that somehow showed a lack of focus. But in the last 10, 15 years, what I know is true is that it's actually a huge benefit, and that all of these things inform the other, and that is one of my strengths instead of one of my weaknesses. So in a way, I think that paper and my identity connect in that way. You know, I think that obviously everyone's personal feelings towards the material and how they connect with it are different. But for me, that it, like, just in general with materials, I do find that the materials speak themselves, you know, that there is sort of a language that they want to use, and that I'm trying to listen to that and not fight against the material. So trying to say, this material wants to behave this way, I'm going to use it to create this sculpture, or you know, this material really doesn't want to bend this way, maybe I should try steel or something different. So really, I find that connection to how materials behave, and the fact that I've had a pretty rounded education here at Penland School, taking a lot of classes. When I did there's actually a 2-year fellowship as well that I did about 8 years ago, and in that I got to take classes across a wide array of media. So, you know, I learned how to weave, so textiles classes, metals classes, glass blowing. Actually, I did get glass casting instead of glass blowing, and paper making, ceramics, iron, wood, jewelry. There's a ton more, but I was able to take classes in all those different areas, and that, I think, has just enforced this need to work with my hands and to explore materials in that way, and how they want to be used, and how they behave well or not. You know, you might want to go you might want to fight it and have that be part of the outcome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I very agree with your opinion about that. Materials themselves can speak themselves. And here comes another question, comes from Z, because for some reason he is unspeakable today. So his question is, how can you express a subtle concept in your work?
How can I express what? Sorry, I didn't catch the end of that.
A subtle concept.
A subtle concept. Yeah. Well, I'm always trying to perfect that. I think, you know, actually years ago, I did a group project with someone, and our team became called Team Subtle, because people found that what we did was so subtle. And I think that's a theme throughout my work, or has been, that you know, maybe because I am looking so much at the way that the material behaves, I get really close in on something, and I think I'm taking a huge step. You know, I think I'm doing something wild, but really it can be subtle. So I do think that I have some experience with that, and you know, I think it's a practice, and I think that the more you do the work, the more that you can perfect that subtlety. I don't want to say that I have it figured out. It's a constant balance, and I think that, you know, there's that certain amount of listening and paying attention very acutely that helps speak those subtleties, and hopefully that's something that is translated and picked up from the viewer. And often it is, and sometimes it's not. It's obviously not always going to be what someone's interested in, and subtle work can be pretty easy to pass by, because it's not loud and in your face. But I think that for me, paying attention and constantly practicing, helps me better bring out any kind of subtlety in form and in concept.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, it's marvelous. I'm just intrigued. So what are your plans now that your residency is coming to an end? And have you anything concrete, and what are you going to do? Are we going to see you here in the UK or in Europe soon?
I hope so. Gosh, yeah, I hope so. Yeah, so I have a couple more months here at Penland, and my plan is to set up my studio, and I'll stay in North Carolina, probably not too far from here. Asheville, North Carolina is about an hour away, and so I'm looking to set up my studio there, continue with casting paper and showing that work, and I hope that I can make it to the UK soon. We'll see how the year turns out. But the goal for me is really, the way I always describe it is that this like path of creativity or of following your artistic path is for me kind of a thread that you get to follow, and that I'm always just trying to get one step further along the thread. So the plan is to do some more casting paper. I'm also interested in, I've been exploring linen, and you can use linen fiber, flax to create pulp and make paper with that as well. But I'm sort of connecting back to this tradition of textile work and printing with that, and so I'm interested in seeing where the cast pieces and these cloth pieces start to overlap. So that's sort of the next step for me at this time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about this. Of course, it's something I've been thinking about as an artist, using basically papier-mâché in my work, in my practice, to address identity, multiracial issues, to do with women, basically, because I've been addressing social injustices with women. So I make works that I feel speaks in a clear language that all women, regardless of their race, color, language, whatever, will understand. And after all of that, since I've been addressing the ruin of representation as well with this, I worry so much about the preservation of this unique material. And while I was thinking about that, I came across Kiki Smith's thesis project on conservation treatment of her papier-mâché works as well, because she made a lot of works on papier-mâché. Maybe she thought about the future of the material, then she started thinking conservation. So do you worry so much about what you make? Do you worry about how long they're going to last? Or are you just making them for now because most of the things made from papier-mâché, people don't seem to, you know, show a lot of interests in it, in the sense that they have grouped it along with crafts, and they tell you it's that goes with now. But I want to argue against that papier-mâché can be cared for as long as we would want it, you know, to be. And there used to be a papier-mâché church built in Norway. It stood for 37 years before things went wrong. So now that papier-mâché is, you know, it has taken the integral part of your work, do you worry about conservation? Do you worry about preserving it? And what do you think will be advisable for Rose, you know, watching you and listening to you, and how you have been handling this magnificent material? Is there a way you can, you know, say something in this line of conservation? Do you worry so much about your work lasting for that you would want it to last for, and to sit in a gallery or in a museum someday, where generations and generations after us will come to watch? Do you worry about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think about it a lot. I think that, you know, within the context of contemporary craft, you know, there is, and art and maybe design in some situations, like there is a focus on that. And being around here at the school where people are working with glass and metal and things that obviously hold up better, or could potentially hold up better over time, I'm definitely considering the future of the piece and how it's going to hold up. And sometimes I think that gets in the way, you know, obviously, and I think that it can be detrimental to the work. And so actually a thing that I did in the last couple of years, one winter, I was having this struggle actually between, it kind of fits into what you're talking about, where I was wondering, okay, I can make this thing out of cardboard, but how am I going to sell it? Like, who's going to want to buy this thing out of cardboard? This is very acidic material. Like, it's not going to hold up over time. Like, how long will it actually last? So I was getting caught in that mindset of like placing the value of the material on how long it lasts. I wanted to shift my perspective on that and be able to really, again, like, think about the materials and what they're good for, and say, like, there is other value in things beyond monetary, or beyond like this thing, you know, gold is amazing because it's gonna hold up, and it's gonna continue to have this value. Like, that's a certain kind of value, but I just don't want that to be the central part of my work. I realize that I have to, in a lot of ways, like, live within this society and address those things. But I wanted to kind of free myself, at least allow myself for a period of time to really think about the work and not what the future of the work was. And so in doing that, that's when I really dove into making these modular cardboard forms and thinking about them in more of a loose and kind of playful manner. So I would take a bunch of the cardboard forms outside somewhere and kind of do a stack of them, build loosely, and I started filming that. And I realized that for me there is a connection to time that I haven't been able to fully tap into in my work. And in making these videos of actually using the pieces and showing their versatility and showing like how they can conform to different situations, that has helped me think about ways to incorporate time and timelines into the work, which is, it's maybe like the next, it's like maybe the next thing that's gonna happen for me, where the work might not be as much about the physical object in the end, but how it's interacted with and how I can share that with other people. Because, you know, I think that people who work like within, that are really connected to materials and are connected to craft, you know, we get pretty nerdy about craft and about process. And, you know, I think there's, you know, a lot of talk about how you get lost in making the work, and that kind of meditation in making is very addictive. And I want to share that with people, and I want other people to experience that deep connection with material. And I know that that's, you know, not for everybody, but I feel like it's definitely an empowering way to approach life. And I think that it helps you develop creative thinking and problem solving skills that can apply to so many different things. So I'm kind of getting off track from what you were asking about, but yes, I do think about how materials are going to last and how they will be preserved. But I feel like at some point that can be a hindrance in the work. And so I think specifically with the cardboard work, I just decided, you know, I'm not going to, like, this material is obviously acidic. It's gonna break down. I can't say exactly how long, let's say 50 to 100 years, you know, it's not gonna be around. But with the cast paper, I do think that actually it can stand up and is a very strong material. But I just don't think that, I don't think it should be the only thing, like, I don't think it should be the only thing that is important in making the work. And maybe there's a connection to time and to not wanting to have this. You know, I made these cardboard pieces that I called temporary monuments, and my idea was actually that it was a monument to the temporary, and that you had that monument for a period of time to appreciate that period of time, and that it wasn't something that was supposed to last into the future, that you would build the next monument then. And so sort of this kind of idea of honoring the present moment and the time that we're in, and moving forward from that. And so, you know, I've definitely explored that idea of the kind of connecting with the temporary nature of life, and not striving to have a legacy in the way of having to make my mark on the world. So I think there's yeah, it's a good thing to be questioning and thinking about. I definitely never just make like, I can't get away from thinking about it, but I can choose to not make it the focus, and to not place that value on the material. Yeah, I think that answers your question.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Yeah, thank you all. I think maybe we have time for another question.
I had actually a question. I was wondering, because I've noticed there's something very lyrical and powerful in a lot of your works. And I wanted to ask you, what's one of the most poetic experiences that you've had with paper, and also, or in general with any of your other crafts and arts, and how it inspired you to look at something differently?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that there's in making work, there's a certain amount of just pure joy in working with the material, and I'm not sure about the poetics of the material itself, but I think there's something poetic in connecting with a material in general. And it goes back to what I was talking about as far as paying attention and responding, like really responding to the material. And I've always said that that kind of connection can be really can run really deep. And for me, working with materials has always been the place where I feel like the most connected with life and the most excited, and I see the most potential. And so I've always tried to follow experiences and opportunities that allow me to do that more. It's challenging, but the rewards are getting to have those moments with the material and create something that propels you forward to the next thing. So I can't say that I have one specific idea of when I've had a poetic moment with the work, but I do have a very calm and quiet practice. When the one time that I took an iron class, where we were etching steel and fabricating steel, at some point I was just like, it's so loud and it's so loud in here. Like, how does anyone think? So I am pretty. I do like things to be really quiet, and kind of just generally in my life, I have that kind of quiet, calm state of being, and I think that it's sort of an extension from life to the work. And if the work communicates that feeling to other people in an abstract way, and somehow that is communicated, then I feel like I've been successful. And so I can't control how other people are going to respond to it, but if I put everything into making the work, I feel like it has sort of something that's innate in it that communicates to people that care in working with the material.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
That's very insightful. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's so nice to talk with you all, and I'm happy to answer any other questions at some point, and I'd also be happy to send along some resources if anyone is curious. And I know we talked about some other artists and their work yesterday, and so I can send along some of that if that's helpful for you all.
Yes, thank you. That would be fantastic. And thank
Okay.
you for taking the time to talk to us and sharing so much. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for including me in this. I'm looking forward to kind of following along online and seeing everything that you do. I'm excited about the work that you're doing, and I hope we can stay connected.
Definitely, and we hope we get the chance to meet you in person.
Yeah, I will let you know. I would be so excited to come and visit. It's been a while.
That would be great. Please tell us. And good luck with the rest of your projects, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Take care.